Coming up, a Sad Styles production.
Hello and welcome. My name is Mikey Aaronworth, signing on to the sign-off of Frameworth podcast for yet another week. It's the forum for all the stories you didn't know you wished you knew about sports and sports marketing, and maybe a little bit more this week as we get into our guest who we'll introduce in just a moment. I am joined in studio once again in this new format, side by side with my co-host, Brian Aaronworth, president of Frameworth Sports Marketing, now looking me in the eyes. You're getting used to that, right? For a while you were avoiding it, instead preferring to look at your own camera feed there, right?
Yep, that's where I'm going to look from now on.
I don't blame you. It's a handsome feed. I'll be looking slightly to the right of that at my own. But if you're not watching us over on YouTube and you're joining us over on one of our podcast platforms, thank you so much for joining us there, and thank you for all the love and support we've been shown over the past week. So we're going to blow through the reviews because we're trying to get right into the good stuff here on this one. Our guest this week, we're speaking with a man who exemplifies the same spirit of hard work and familial sensibility which we have come to love about the world of hockey, but it's applied to another industry entirely this week. His legacy began in Canada in 1927, long before he was born, but stretched from literal coast to coast across the country, sprouting out from seeds sown with love and dedication. He's the CEO, chairman, and president of Andrew Peller Limited, and one of the visionaries behind Wayne Gretzky Estates. Ladies and gentlemen, John Peller. John, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with both you and your dad, Mikey.
Yeah. A friend of the company in a variety of forms. Obviously, one thing that we'll get into in a little bit. We mentioned that name, Wayne Gretzky, off the top. We had first met, I think, at the Wayne Gretzky Fantasy Camp, which is a topic of conversation that comes up quite often on this podcast and something that we always love to get into in a little bit. But before we do that, I do want to sort of set up your history with the company, and the company as a whole is sort of a national institution at this point. I mentioned 1927 when your legacy began, and that's when your grandfather, Andrew Peller, came in through Halifax from Hungary, landing at Pier 21. Didn't stay there very long, but had he imparted any wisdom in terms of what that transition into Canada was like at that point, and why Canada in the first place?
Yeah, well, in fact, I always tell people the most important day of my life happened long before I was born. I was born in 57 and I'm 65 today.
Hey, happy birthday.
But but remembering, my grandfather on that day, what I remember most about his crossing was that he had three sons at the time. Very, very infant sons. He was only 24 years old. He had three sons like I have three sons today. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, through the poverty and diseases that were going through Hungary and Europe at the time, he lost two of his children, so that he was left only with one child, my dad, who was 2 years old. And my grandma, who was in her late teens at the time, kind of looked at him and said, Andy, if you don't do something, we're never going to have a family. So that, the motivation for him to make that journey on his own, as a young man without money or without anything but a hope for a better life, it was to build a great family. And my life has been rooted in that ambition to be very mindful of whatever I can do to have a great family. And that, by the way, was one of the reasons Wayne and I, have shared in common. So, Andy ended up going to Winnipeg because he was on one of those farm labor exchange programs and made his way to Kitchener shortly. And he was a very entrepreneurial individual and got involved in a brewery, and it didn't take him long before he started many businesses. And like entrepreneurs, he went through many successes and some colossal failures. Mm-hmm. And it was really at the end of his business career, he was 58 when he started the wine business. He unfortunately had lost all the money he had ever made shortly before he started our winery, which is really the legacy of his life, was having worked so hard to be so successful. He lost all his money in a newspaper that was started in Hamilton in 1955. So he kind of had to start all over again. And it was 1961. He had to borrow. My father was a physician in Hamilton, and he had to borrow money from my dad and five of his medical buddies. And they put together some seed capital and started the winery. And then, kind of the rest, they say, is history.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, that focus on family and that story of your dad needing to kind of change his direction in life, which I want to get to in a little bit as well. But prior to that, just, I mentioned sowing the seeds, which, trying to work on multiple levels there, but that seed of family seems to be inherent to the progress and the success that you've had at Andrew Peller Limited, and kind of, I think, the homage that you pay to your grandfather and your father as well. It seems to almost like, they talk about how the soil quality can change the taste of a wine. It's as though the soil quality within your family has affected the whatever has sprout out as a result of that. And it seems like there's something just rich and nourishing in there. I talk also about coast to coast. You mentioned that your grandfather, Andrew, who I know sometimes you refer to as Andy. So if that comes up and the listener hears that, just to clarify, eventually landed in Halifax and eventually made his way. I think the first winery that he had started was in BC. What is that process like, getting from one coast to the next? Were there detours along the way? I know obviously started with the newspaper, but that eventual progress to the other side of Canada, was that intentional, or was that just something that happened as a result of needing to move around?
It's comical. It's comical because what happened was when he started his brewery, he had worked for E.P. Taylor for his brewing business in Toronto, and he started his own brewery in Hamilton, and it became very, very successful. And the key to his marketing was you weren't allowed to do any type of beverage alcohol advertising in the 50s. It was illegal.
Right.
And my grandpa, he figured out, what I could do? He started an ice cube company that had the same name as his beer. So his beer was Peller's Beer, and he started selling Peller's Ice. And Gordon Sinclair would get on the news broadcast on the radio and invite everybody, don't forget when you're going to the party this weekend to take the Pellers. And then he'd delay. And then he'd say ice.
Oh, wow. I love that.
So it became a big joke, and people loved it. And the only problem was when his paper failed and he wanted to get a wine license in Ontario, the premier at the time was Leslie Frost, and his wife was a prohibitionist. And they had a long memory for how he kind of played with the rules. So they weren't going to bend over and help him. So he ended up just hopping on a plane and heading out to British Columbia. And within a matter of weeks, the government there gave him a license, and off he went.
That's amazing. And I think that was Port Moody. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Opened under Andres Wines. Now, we've talked about Andrew and we've talked about Andy. We've also talked about marketing. The decision to call it Andres Wines, like A-N-D-R-E with an accent, S Wines, was there an intention there to lend some sort of like a cultural injection from somewhere else, or was that just the name? Am I reading too much into that?
No, I think you got it. His actual, in Hungary, his baptismal name was Andreas.
Okay.
And so he thought, that it had a bit more of a European flair.
Sure. Yeah.
The real motivation was, at the time, all the retail stores, listed everything in alphabetical order. So he wanted an A name to be at the top of the list.
Amazing. I love that.
He went with his name, Andres, and kind of Frenchified it to Andres. And it was a great day for me in the mid 90s when, we were investing heavily in the premium wine industry, and we wanted to, go from an old corporate name, Andres, that was associated with our sparkling past, to a more premium, estate wine positioning, and returning the company to what he probably should have called it, which was Andrew Peller Limited. Was a great day for me.
I love that story as well. And, we've brought up marketing quite often, and this is sort of to keep the tie to the theme of the podcast, which is that sports marketing, which we do all the time. Marketing can be applied to a ton of different industries. So to hear these sorts of stories, I'm sure my dad is kind of chomping at the bit. Yeah. I mean, this is all similar to what you had to do to grow your business too.
You know what? I love these stories because we talk about entrepreneurialism, and you don't build these kind of business without unique ideas and people that are successful entrepreneurs just see things, see opportunities there, just the way you market your product, just the opportunities that exist for those things that other people don't see. And that's what sets one company ahead of the other. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. And I like the story too, that, you talk about your grandfather, Andrew, and how significant his impact was in that entrepreneurial landscape. Joe, your father, was sort of, not cut from a different cloth, the same cloth, but took a different path, very much an academic. He was the chief medicine for Hamilton Civic Hospitals, and left, as you mentioned at the time, to help his father, your grandfather, with the winery. Do you find that you have struggled to kind of find some balance between the two, between your grandfather, who was almost pure entrepreneurial, I mean, had an engineering background, but more entrepreneurial, and your father, who was more of an academic?
I mean, I've thought about that. And in the end, you are who you are.
Right.
And being successful means trying to understand your kind of strengths and weaks and natural. My grandpa and my dad couldn't have been more different. They were 1 and 9. Like, my grandpa was a brash, tough, knock him down, get her done. You know, we always told people, if you want to stop him, you better take more than a 4x4 to his forehead, because anything less than that will not stop him. And my dad was exactly the opposite. He was a very quiet, reflective, humble, and he, when you talk about family, I know my dad never intended to get into business, and he loved being in medicine.
Right.
And he went to help my dad. To help my grandfather was his sole motivation, because he knew it meant a lot to him. And once Joe got involved, he enjoyed it. It was a very different world than the medical world he grew up in. But I like to think that I'd like to think I'm a nice blend of the two of them. And I've always told people I think entrepreneurs are really born, not raised. And I say that not because we can do lots of things to improve our entrepreneurial IQ and capability. But over a lifetime, you realize that the real true entrepreneurs are born with this obsession to get something done. They're totally adverse to risk, right. And they have a sense of drive and commitment to what they do that just is beyond the scope of normal people. And eventually they get challenged by their own strengths, right? They don't tend to be great organizational people and the like, but
we talk about this cultivation of soil, and it seems like you need a similar ecosystem in growing grapes to create the wine, right? It can't just be all one thing. You have to find that balance, and it seems like your family has found that in almost a microcosmic way. Growing the company, you grow the vines.
Hey, John, is that why we find it hard to retire? Everybody keeps telling me, you got to retire. Enjoy what you're doing. I said, I enjoy what I do. I mean, hey, I don't want to work as hard as I used to, but I just can't see myself retiring, because every day I come up with ideas that are challenging, and I think that's I got to try. Not just in my industry, I come up with ideas for other people's, and I just don't have the time to put them all together anymore. But I think that's why I don't. What's your thoughts on retirement?
I tell the story about when my father decided to retire, and the interesting point here is that my grandfather would never have retired. He had never let go of the rope, the control. I mean, this was part of his life. Whereas my dad, he got to 65 or 66, and I was only in 34, 35 at the time. And he came to me on a Friday afternoon and said, "You know what, son, on Monday, I'm going to make you president, and I'm going to retire." And he said, "I want you to know one thing, there can really only be one accountable leader in a company. And from now on, that will be you. And whatever you say will go. However, I'm definitely going to tell you what I think, whether you want to hear it or not." He says, "But I think you're going to do a great job, son. Come over here." Gives me a nice hug and a kiss and walks out the door in 3 minutes. Wow. My grandfather would never have done that.
Wow.
And it was more of a struggle with my dad, but eventually it flip-flopped. It was always me trying to get recognition and him not wanting to let the recognition go. And then all of a sudden, at some point in our lives, it flip-flopped, and he couldn't say enough good things about me, and I couldn't say enough good things about him. Right?
So Well, I think the key to organizations growing is to, develop a culture of learning. And it takes a great deal of humility, in
Sure.
terms of a culture to keep an open mind, open heart. And that's what my dad was good at. So that it was the combined strengths of the two of them that eventually, gave us a platform for growth.
It's that old saying, the older I get, the smarter my father got.
I'm curious. I should know this. I feel I believe Andrew passed away in '94, and the company was renamed Andrew Peller Limited.
Mm-hmm.
Was it '95? So was that afterwards?
Geez, you're testing my memory, Mikey. I think it was. Yeah, I actually think we changed the name in the kind of 1996, 97 era, right?
Okay, so he wouldn't have been around for that change. Okay,
sadly, no.
Okay. Well, you know what? We keep talking around this idea of family, and there's another family that's pretty popular in the realm of our podcast and in the realm of sports as well. So I'd like to sort of talk about, we mentioned it at the top, your involvement with Wayne Gretzky Estates. Your relationship as well with Wayne Gretzky seems to have flourished. It seems like you guys have built a brand and a sort of an institution in Canada. That whole process, I believe Wayne Gretzky first started off with Creekside. And then you had taken over the brand when Creekside was looking to sell off some of their properties. What was your involvement there? Was there any hesitation in getting involved with a name like Wayne Gretzky or any celebrity name? Understanding.
Before I got joined the winery in 1989. I spent 5 years in New Jersey working for Nabisco Brands, and I was in brand marketing. And there was a promotion we did for our Wheaties cereal that had us put Jane Fonda, because she was revolutionizing morning workouts, with her videos and the like. So it seemed like a very, very positive. In fact, our sales promotion selling set a record in US grocery because of how popular this promotion was. You could get a free video or whatever it was.
Oh, wow.
And so it seemed like a great idea. And literally within 2 weeks of the launch, there were the most incredible protests from U.S. military veterans who remembered Jane Fonda as Hanoi Jane, an anti-war protester.
Oh, wow.
And the shit hit the fan, to say the least. We had to pull all the product out of the system. And, at the time, I think we wrote off $8 or $10 million, which was like a colossal write-off in 1986 or whenever it was. And I remember when I was watching one of the older senior marketing managers came up and poked me in the chest. He said, "You remember this, kid. Don't you ever get involved in any celebrity brands." Because it's always what happened. So it was, we had been approached many times by people and to do brands and celebrity brands, so that, when this opportunity came up, I was reflecting on it. And at the same time, I was born in Ancaster and spent my whole life playing hockey. And obviously Wayne was right next door. Although obviously I didn't know him. We crossed paths as Pee-wees in a Tiger Town tournament. And it was at the double rinks in Ancaster. And I remember we played on one pad where there were like 100 people. And then of course Wayne was playing in the other one. And I'd never seen that many people in my life. And, everyone told me, we all came out of our dressing room and what the hell is going on? They said, "Well, he's here." "What do you mean he's here? Who's he?" "Oh, he's the greatest guy. We think he's the greatest hockey player ever," type thing. So I went and watched Wayne play that afternoon. And of course he was playing 2 years under his age group in Pee-wee. And, but I remember when he came and talked to us about it, and we met with Glenn and Darren Cleary. We were considering, the commitment it would take, and to be truthful, these types of decisions, when I make them, is this something you want to do for 20 years? As opposed to, this isn't just an advertising promotional thing. Mm-hmm. This is a long-term commitment to invest in a significant business. So Diane and we had to get down and either make a decision to go or not. We went to a Leaf game, think it was on a Thursday night, and we had to decide the next day. And we're watching the game from our seats, and all of a sudden on the Jumbotron, they came out celebrating birthdays at the game. And they went through about 8 or 9, and the last birthday they put up was Walter Gretzky.
Oh, okay.
And I try to remember his birthday. I think it was his 74th or 5th, or whatever it was. And all of a sudden, the camera at the Gardens or the ACC went into, where Walter's seats were, and the gold's in the corner there. And I have never seen a standing ovation for anybody in my life like I witnessed that evening.
That's amazing.
They came back from commercial because, they did it between advertising commercial break. Both teams had come over into the corner, right? The referees were over in the corner. Everyone is expecting the game to be starting right after the commercial break stopped. And there's Walter standing up, and the place would not stop. It went on for like what seemed at least to be like 8, 9, 10 minutes. And there he sat waving humbly at everybody. And I thought, holy shit, it struck me that the popularity of Gretzky's, not just Wayne, but his father,
right.
It transcended sports.
Mm-hmm.
It was really, people identified with them as, something iconically Canadian, quality, right, that were things that we hold dear: humility and love for their country and for their game and for family. So once I saw that, I thought, the hell with that, I'm in, let's go. Cause that's magic. And in fact, I think that's largely what's made the brand so successful, is that people are proud to associate with Wayne and his family and their values.
And it seems, you mentioned their values, and that can mean a variety of things. And I think it means a variety of things to a variety of people. But one of those at their core, apart from just, family for the sake of family, is that sense of Canadiana. Mm-hmm. That's super important to what your brand is as well. In Wayne Gretzky's case and his family's case, it's celebrating that identity and embracing that identity. And I'd imagine something similar almost to your grandpa when he first came. It seemed like it was about this celebration of Canadian identity. Do you find that in partnering with someone like Wayne, it sort of bolsters that? I mean, I'd imagine, comparing this sort of side by side, hockey being the one exception, on a grand scale, Canada, when it comes to sports, kind of views ourselves as almost needing to prove ourselves a little bit more. When it comes to basketball and football and soccer, we're the underdog, but we're making our way in the game. In terms of wineries on a global scale, does Canada also have that sort of complex? And do you find a comparison there of really trying to show to the world, like, guys, we are more than maybe you would have given us credit for, and now with this bolstering of our brands coming together, we're really going to show that to people? Is that part of your principle?
I think there's certainly this desire for us in the wine industry. It's, where we are in our point in time of, taking a great story of best in class quality to the world. Mm-hmm. And certainly that's the core of our company's investment. But in the case of Wayne, most of our wineries are big stories about, appellations and climate and terroir and great details about wine and wine quality. It was, and people were interested, like, what does Wayne want to really get in the wine business? Why would he get involved with this type of a business venture? It really was his humility that drew me to him, and that it was okay to have a wine brand, and in our case, a whiskey brand,
right,
and craft beer brand that was just really about someone's commitment to their values and their purpose in life. And I always loved that people, whenever Wayne was with us and we were going to go to do a wine tasting, people were they going to ask him a question he couldn't understand about wine, sure, or whatever. In fact, Wayne always said, "Hey, listen," he says, "John," he says, "I've played hockey with John Peller. He goes, and I'm glad to tell you that he could never teach me or tell me anything about hockey, but I don't know a lot about wine, and I'm just learning about it. So, Wayne's approach to the whole thing was his genuine humility. And in fact, through your dad and playing hockey down at the fantasy camp, we started spending lots of time with Walter. And of course, he completely melts you with his incredible sense of spirit and care for other people, and his spirit, and even Glenn's and the families, was as big a part of what we're doing. So that my point in all of this is our brand was really grounded in the purpose of their family and wanting to do something for the long term. I must tell you a quick story. When we launched the Gretzky Estates down in Niagara-on-the-Lake, we had a big party. I know your dad was there, and so were you, I believe. And when Wayne arrived with his family and we went up just to say some introductory words, he was kind of looking around, and I saw in his eyes, like, holy shit, what are we doing here? Like, look at all the capital that's been, invested. And I could tell just by looking at him without him saying a word, he had one of these thoughts that struck him. My God, when I said to Wayne, this is going to be here a long time after you and I are gone.
Right.
In other words, this wasn't just a promotion or an advertisement. It was a commitment to do something generationally.
Right.
And it was grounded in his and my kind of mutual love for our families and our country, and learning and growing and doing something different. And what we did there, we built, a solid BQA winery platform in both Niagara, rooted in Niagara viticulture. We also did a similar program in the Okanagan with our wines out there, but we just wanted soon to do a Canadian whiskey and a craft beer. And, these weren't things that other wineries were doing.
Right.
It reflected us building on a different brand platform. One of which, as you know, is that we built a beautiful little hockey rink in the middle of our vineyard, which has
whose idea was it to bury the loonie at the center of the ice rink? Is that yours or Wayne's?
That was definitely neither of ours, but whoever did, I thought, geez, that's a great idea.
There you go. Yeah.
But the nothing captures the story of Wayne and his family better than the story of Walter building the rink in their family's backyard. And all of us who know the Gretzkys, we've gone to their house in Brantford and listen how Walter would proudly tell all these stories, but he loved that little rink. Mm-hmm. And so we thought, geez, why don't we put a rink in there? And the Gretzky kids called it the Wally Coliseum.
The Wally Coliseum.
That was their name for their backyard rink. And I can't tell you how popular that rink is and how amazing it is to see, grandparents coming with their children who've had children, and they're taking them out to skate, and the social vibe at Gretzky's has.
Well, you know what, John, it's so much more than that. Mm-hmm. I was blown away the first time. I was honored that Wayne asked me to go to the opening, along with most of the people from the fantasy camp who became friends over the years. So we all bust down there from the Ritz downtown, and I was blown away. It's a destination spot. The rink is one component, which is a major component.
Sure.
But it's such a beautiful environment, and I've been there a number of times since. In fact, the kids took me down for my birthday, and we did a tour of a number of wineries down there. But that was our final spot, and we just sat there and just kind of soaked it all in.
That was my brother's gift to him, and he rubs it in my face all the time. I guess I should have got him something better than a belt that year.
Step up next time, Mikey. Anyway, so I would just say that I think that set the standard. There's a lot of wineries down there, and all nice wineries to go do some wine tasting. And if you do that tour, but stop, definitely the ultimate one is the Wayne Gretzky Winery, because it's so much more. There's so much more to it.
The fascinating thing about that, I think, is, a lot of people have the opposite mentality compared to you, where when they want to get involved with an athlete of some sort, they're essentially using the athlete's name to sell a brand of wine that is maybe lesser. But specifically, Wayne had a quote on his website, which I think is echoed by what you're saying here. He said, it says his goal was simple: to create a collection of wines that people might buy once because of the name of its label, but would choose to enjoy again and again once they discovered the quality of the wine itself. And that is the difference between a marketing campaign and something that's meant to last 20 years. But going into that, I'm so curious to get your perspective on those initial conversations you would have had with Wayne. You know, you talk about what he would say in public and say, you know, there's nothing that John can teach me on the ice rink, but you know, there's a lot that you could teach him in the realm of wineries, and that understanding that you're going to be partnering with the Great One and be his Great One for a little bit. Was there any sense of intimidation there when, you know, maybe he said something wrong potentially and you're questioning whether or not you can call him out on that? What did that process feel like from beginning to end?
I mean, truthfully, you know, Wayne's an incredibly humble person. That's the bottom line. He and our business and his brand and our brand there, you know, has nothing to do with pretension. And I think that's why a lot of people like it.
Right.
People are always surprised. You know, we get more old ladies, and I mean, these aren't just hockey players that come and visit us. Like his reach into the community is mind-boggling, and it's really those values that motivate people. So, I mean, he loves to engage with people, and whether it's with our winemakers or our staff or whenever we visited people, he's anxious to get to know people and what they're about and how he can help. And he meets with our customers, and he's never worried of beans about anything, because as long as you're genuine and truthful, and you know, that's what matters the most. So there was never been any friction, and in fact, we've got a great friendship, and we're proud of everything that, you know, that we've built, and we think it has a great future.
What is the collaborative effort between the two of you? Primarily in the beginning, you know, building Wayne Gretzky's Estates. We spoke with Glenn being his brother, and Lori Holomis at the time, who would have been involved as well, about the creation of the estates there and how much they wanted to imbue those estates with the feeling of their home growing up. You know, they wanted to let people into their home. Now, obviously, that's very much a Gretzky thing. However, in order to bring that into fruition, to make it real, someone like you has to get involved. So what did that collaboration look like? What was your involvement in pitching ideas? Or was it more hearing them out and saying, okay, I know how to make this a real thing, leave it to me, and we'll open it from there?
Well, I mean, you know, for one thing, it was collaborative. And the one thing I wanted to make sure that Wayne always knew is that we will never say anything, you know, or make representations about his family or his life that he doesn't bless or tell us that he wants us to say. Right. Because a lot of this is personal. And you know, we're putting in pictures of his family and friends. And we have, as you know, we've got that beautiful little mural of the family farm in that was in Paris, Ontario, and whatever. So, I mean, we definitely wanted to tell we wanted to make it personal so that it wasn't just like hockey sticks and pucks and stuff. And it was more about them as people, and great pictures of Walters, you know, and their extended family, so that that people could connect with him more personally, more than anything. So I think that the key was to make sure that there was a trust, and that it's their family, their name, their right to control how that story gets told. Right. But they're, like I said, they're so easy to work with, and it was just nothing but fun. And we designed the facility, you know, to look like a barn, because growing up, we played every arena we played in, we called the barn. And then, of course, it had a pond out back, right? So they were involved in helping us with everything like that. And it's been
John, you talk about building relationships, and of course, with people like Wayne, obviously, we both had a longstanding friendship and relationship, and Sidney, Crosby, and the other people that we deal with. And you say that you've got to make sure that you don't do anything without their permission, or that you follow. But a big part of that has to be the being intuitive in understanding your client, because you don't go to them every time you have an idea and say, can I do this or not? You know what Wayne's about after initial dealings with him. and you know what's acceptable and what isn't. And sometimes he surprises me. Like I'll ask him something and he'll go, yeah, we can do that. And I'll go, really? Okay, so I was off on that one. But for the most part, you have to understand your client because they're not always there to say yes or no, and you can't wait for it all the time. So you can't make moves without really knowing them. And that's what I think keep the relationship strong.
Well, one in particular, if we've been out with Wayne and he goes to an event, it's people will get in his face very quickly and want autographs and pictures and the like. And what we learned early on and quickly was, Wayne likes to be at smaller events of 20 to 30 people at the most.
Right.
20 is a great number because he actually wants to talk with people and enjoy himself and get to know them and ask them. It's really a genuine thing on his part, as opposed to as soon as you get into a big room, forget it. All bets are off. And he can't even have a single discussion with anybody without someone else sticking a cell phone in his face, and I know those people are awfully well intended, but it turns then event into a very, unenjoyable, anxious moment for him. So we always make sure we have 20 people and he gets to meet everybody and everyone has a great time. And of course, they're all blown away by how much fun it is to be around him. I mean, as you know, Brian, he is a very, very entertaining and funny person. And he loves to talk hockey and tell stories and you give him the chance to have the types of conversations he wants to have with you, he'll blow you away.
Yeah.
It seems like that's the case. Similar to your winery and your estates as well. It's more about quality over quantity. It's a cliche, but it is. It's let's have a smaller grouping of people, make it more intimate and allow to touch them in more significant ways, as opposed to just let's let 1,000 people into the room and they've all can say they've shared the same breath as him. Exactly. And one of those such cases, as we mentioned at the top of the episode, is the Wayne Gretzky Fantasy Camp. A great addition to getting into a partnership with Wayne is that you get invites to the Wayne Gretzky Fantasy Camp. Tell me that wasn't the tipping point in terms
John
of
kept dominating all the championships with his son. Yeah.
I had so much fun there, way more than I expected. And again, the hockey was amazing.
Yeah.
How much fun it was. And everybody, most 90% of the people there had played competitive hockey. Mm-hmm. So playing non-contact hockey at a, competitive fun level without worried about getting, run over or whatever. It was really amazing. And, I have one kind of great story I tell people because Wayne plays on all the different teams once. So where everybody else is on a team, he rotates around. And it was one of the first times I had been there, and there was about a minute left in the game, and I was ready just to go over the boards by myself on a regular shift change. And Wayne reached over, he goes, "Johnny, wait 1 sec. I'll skate the last shift with you." I thought, holy shit. And Gretzky just wants to skate the last shift with me. So we both went over, 45 seconds left. And as fate would have it, I got the puck in the middle of the ice. I mean, I heard him call for a pass, and, he was going down the left wing, crosses the blue line, and he goes and skates behind the net. And I mean, I was just looking around the front of him, and all of a sudden I feel this whack, this puck hits me right on the tape, and I didn't even see it coming. So there were only several seconds left, and I didn't have time to move. I just shot quickly, and then I heard this horrible clank off the glass, and then I heard everybody kind of oohing and awing. And what I didn't realize was Wayne was behind the net, and I had shot hard, and I'd missed his ear by inches. And I felt like, oh my, someone says, "You asshole, you almost killed Wayne Gretzky." I said, "Fuck, I didn't mean to do it." So, later that night we had our, cocktail reception at Hyde, and
Hyde being one of the bars in the hotel,
at the Bellagio there. And I walked in holding hands with my wife, Diane, and all of a sudden I see Wayne across the room lock eyes with me. He starts coming over at me. I thought, oh, geez, here we go. So he came over and he said to me, "Hey, John, hold on just for a second. I was just talking about you." and I said quickly, "Wayne, I am so sorry." He goes, "John, stop." He says, "I played hockey for a long time, and I had many wingers, maybe 18 as many. And I gave every one of those wingers that pass from behind the net. He says, the only person who ever took that pass and buried it was Yari Curry. He says, every other asshole shot it over the net. So he goes, as soon as I gave you that pass, I was already starting to duck.
Oh my God. That's amazing.
Yeah.
There's so many of those great stories from that. But
So
more to that point, I mean, hockey was only 50% of it. And then the rest of it was the camaraderie that we all built. I mean, I met you and Diane there, and and Walter was always around. You talk about a guy that was loved.
Yeah.
I mean, he was there all the time. Glennie and the whole family. Yeah, it was exceptional.
Yeah, there were some great experiences there. Obviously, at those events, I'd say there's quite a bit of drinking, which suits your purpose as well for everyone there. One of the things that they would drink, not just the wine, but is the whiskey. You know, something that you got involved with Wayne. Whose idea was that to branch into whiskey, and was that something you had ever gotten into prior to meeting Wayne?
You know, it's funny. If we had ever, you could have argued that if we had started from scratch, maybe we would have gone into craft beer right away. But
right.
it was rooted in a viticulture program first. And, I had been shopping around to get in the craft whiskey business. And I went down to Kentucky and met these guys who were in the heart of the bourbon craft whiskey renaissance that was going on. And, talk to them, and they came up. We were going to do, some kind of like 1812 General Brock whiskey or whatever. And they came up and had dinner with us at Peller Estates. And they, I said, how many people visit this place a year? I said, a couple 100,000. And they said, what? and you know what? They said, hell, I would do that whiskey here. And then we thought about it, and the idea of a Canadian whiskey pairing up with the Canadian icon just made great sense to us.
Right.
And we were doing something different, breaking the mold from just making wine to making wine and whiskey. So that's kind of what we went through. And we put a lot of effort to do something innovative in terms of, we age a portion of our whiskey in red wine oak barrels to provide some, flavor notes that are unique and compelling. And so our red cask blend was our first launch, and it's done incredibly well for us.
So is the beer. I remember when the beer first came out.
Yeah.
I was looking all over for it. I was going to phone you or Wayne and say, hey, I'd like to try this stuff. I finally found it at a little store up in, I don't know, Point a Barrel on the way up to the cottage. It took weeks to find it. It was sold out right away.
Well, it seems like that's kind of part of it, right? We sort of mentioned this prior to starting our recording where, you may not have realized going into it this way, John, but with Wayne's name on the label of anything, us being in the marketing memorabilia world, we're familiar with this. There are people who purchase these bottles for the purpose of having them with the iconography as opposed to drinking them. Now, little do they know they have something delicious on their hands, but their intention is not to open it and drink it. It's just to have it. I mean, that adds so much more spectacle to the realm of what you're doing. But, it seems like you come from a long line of marketers and you're carrying the torch. So, whatever way it's putting those things in people's pockets, that's great. Now, everything you've explained so far started with this story that you told about a celebrity interaction that went very, very wrong, and that you may never have wanted to get back involved in it. Looking backwards, having selected the right athlete to work with, the right celebrity to work with, having been able to build the brand and sort of work with them, a little bit of push and pull here and there. Has that changed your mind on potentially working with more, or now that you're working with the best in the business, is there any reason to look elsewhere?
It's interesting when you look at icons and celebrities and their marketing endorsements. One of the reasons not to do them more often than is they don't work. And in other words, because you take Napa Valley down there have been and still are, whether it was Jack Nicklaus and Arnie Palmer and Mario Andretti and Joe Montana, keep going.
Yep.
There's like 50 of them. none of them have ever done well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and just because, you know, you named a wine after Bobby Orr or Gordie Howe, I mean, there has to be something more compelling about the connection of the person and you know, the brand to your story. I mean, one of the ones we worked with is Jillian Harris, who's you know, out in British Columbia. She's a woman who has her own kind of blog on all things in wine country, food and flowers and whatever. And she's become an incredible spokesperson because this is her passion and the like. So I wouldn't ever say never do it, but there has to be something profound in bringing that name to your product or service, as opposed to
just the name,
you know, just the fact that you're leaning on their name to hype your goods. Because in fact, people are cynical about that.
Yeah, they're skeptical. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you were talking about why you selected Wayne and why you felt it would work with Wayne and Wally. And, you know, in a similar story, I remember calling Tim Hortons up and telling him about Sidney Crosby when he was first coming up. And I knew Sidney's character. Of course, he hadn't established himself at that point, but Tim Hortons had a definite policy of we don't want celebrities representing our product line. But there was a fit there, and Sidney passed up a number of different, you know, fast food things to endorse. He didn't want to do any of that.
I must say one thing too, Brian, if I could, is that, you know, one of the things is often when you're dealing with celebrities, is you're dealing with their agents and their, and this and that. And I wanted no part of that. In fact, we've worked with Glenn from the very beginning, and it's been an incredible relationship. And he enjoys working with us, and we enjoy working with him. And there's a total commitment and trust to the relationship, so that a lot of things have to be right for it to work well.
Right.
And fortunately, you know, working with Glenn has been a real great part of the partnership.
Well, he's committed as much as Wayne is, and so and that's big. But it's the overall picture. You're going to have guys, celebrities that you got to be skeptical because they're going to get you in trouble.
Right.
And that's why a lot of companies don't, just like Jane Fonda. They don't want all of a sudden their brand to go down the toilet because somebody gets caught with a hooker in a hotel room. And you know the characters that you're working with, and you know it's going to be fine.
Yeah. Very specific offering. Hopefully that doesn't happen to any of us. We don't want the sign off going downhill because of any of my weird exploits or my dad's weird exploits. But John, I know you're a busy man. We appreciate you taking the time to come join us. Anything that you want to send people towards? Maybe give a little plug for the estate. What's going on in your world there?
Oh, I'm happy if people come down and visit us.
I'd highly recommend
any of the wineries, for that matter, in wine country, or equally, I hope you guys get out to the Okanagan. There's incredible things happening out in British Columbia as well. But all's good and the future is bright. Thanks so much for having me.
Perfect. Well, once again, for John Peller, for Brian Aaronworth, president of Frameworth Sports Marketing, myself, Mikey Aaronworth, host of the Sign Off podcast. This is us signing off. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we made it to the end of yet another episode. Thanks again so much for joining us. You can find videos of all of our episodes on YouTube by searching the Sign Off Podcast. You can also follow us on Twitter at Frameworth Sport or Instagram at Frameworth Sports. And hey, if you're not sick of me yet, you can find me on Twitter over at Retrograde Mikey, or you can always find me embarrassing myself over on Instagram at Aaronworth. The Sign Off is a proud product of Fadoo Productions and Sad Styles Productions. Executive producers Mikey Aaronworth and Andrew Bascom. Until next week, this is Mikey Aaronworth, signing off.
Furnished by Sad Styles Productions.
Get into it!